And welcome back, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Announcer. And as we said, Jay is going to be on with me. Jay, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Steve. Good to be with you. Welcome back.
Yes, it was. I appreciated your partner in crime over there, Nick Horton, for coming and sitting in for me yesterday. That was pretty cool. I appreciated that. And the new tooth is pretty cool, too. I'm so happy to have it. After that temporary.
That's great. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's not always enjoyable in the process, but it's always good to have it done once it's done.
Yes, thank God for modern medicine and modern dentistry. I never thought I'd crack a tooth, a molar, but lo and behold, it happened. So, Jay, let's start off with some good news for a change, and that is the American Legislative Council has come out with their rankings on states and education freedom, and Arkansas didn't do so badly. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. So the American Legislative Exchange Council, they put out these rankings every year. So they look at all the states and how they're comparing on education freedom. And Arkansas actually was rated number 3 in the country. That's a really big deal, like you said. It's a recognition of the progress that's been made. You know, I'm originally from Mississippi, was born and raised there, and I hadn't been in Arkansas very long until somebody told me that the unofficial state motto for Arkansas was "Thank God for Mississippi," and that was because for the longest time, Arkansas and Mississippi were dealing it out for 49th and 50th in all these national rankings, and people would say, thank God for Mississippi, because otherwise we'd be last. Well, I think what this shows you is that those days are over when it comes to education, because Arkansas is actually leading the country when it comes to education freedom through the reforms that have been passed with the LEARNS Act, the fact that every student now has access to education freedom. And I'll also mention, this is just the latest ranking. So we've been near the top of several national lists like this. And it's something we should be proud of, because we're actually leading the way here. And I think what it shows us, too, is that we're no longer content to be at the bottom. And education freedom is one of those areas where we've really made an impact. It's important also, the reason we talk so much about education freedom is because it's breaking this cycle where for generations kids were trapped in an underperforming public school with no other options. And they were trapped there just because of their zip code. And what education freedom does is it says every student, regardless of where you live or your income, you have the option to choose, whether that's a different public school or a private school or a parochial school or homeschooling. Every student in Arkansas has the ability to choose, and the parents have the ability to choose what setting works best for them. And we're only starting to see how transformational this is going to be. I mean, this is just the first year that this has really been in effect for every student. And I think it's just really exciting. I mean, it's something I'm proud of, and I think every Arkansan should be really proud of the fact that this program is working, and we're getting recognized nationally for how well it's working for our kids.
Yes, and I'm a firm believer in free market capitalism, not this crony capitalism or the pay-to-play, so to speak, that's plaguing our government with all this fraud, but free market capitalism. And some of these public schools, I hope this is a wake-up call to them especially, about teaching children and not indoctrinating them, if you will, but actually teaching them the skills that they need to succeed in life. But it does give the parents the options, and I think that's very, very important.
Well, that's right. And, you know, a lot of times people say, well, that's just people who support education freedom are anti-public schools, or you just don't like public schools. And that's not what this is about. I mean, the majority of kids in Arkansas attend public schools. I graduated from a public school. Public schools are good options for many people in many circumstances, but they're not always right for every kid. And as you mentioned, we've seen stories recently of parents finding out that their kids were being taught things in a public school that did not align with their values. Well, now, thanks to education freedom, parents have a different option, and they have the ultimate form of accountability. You know, we talk a lot about accountability when it comes to education. You hear that word thrown out a lot. We need to hold our schools accountable. And a lot of times that gets boiled down to mean just a test score or a letter grade ranking for a school. But real accountability is when a parent has the ability to walk away and say, I don't like what's happening here, and I'm going to take my kid and take the funding along with my kid to go and choose a different option. And to your point, that has a huge impact, because just like in any other sector, when you have competition and parents now have a voice and the ability to choose something else, it's going to encourage every provider across the board to improve what they're offering.
Yes. And there's a lot of excellent, fine educators, teachers that work for the various public schools. I know, I hear from them. And back when the Democrats were ramming some of the stuff, and now let's face it, the teachers' unions are in the bag for the left and the Democrats. But, you know, there's a lot of teachers that don't buy into that stuff, that they are so dedicated. They want to go to school and teach their kids the subject material and not indoctrinate them, and actually teach them to think. But competition is what it is. And as far as, like, you bring out a great point. If, you know, just say for a parent decides to go to a charter school or a parochial school, and all of a sudden they're getting more and more students in because they're putting out a quality product, then I would imagine that those same parochial schools and charter schools are going to be looking to hire additional educators, and those good teachers will follow the opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Because ultimately what we want here, and I think what everybody wants, is what's best for our kids, what's best for the students. And if we really care about what's best for the students, then we shouldn't really care about where they're getting the best education, because every kid is different. You know, we hear from families where they have multiple kids. One's in public school, one's homeschooled, and one's in a private school because they just need different things. And the sad reality is, you know, you mentioned the teachers union. You know, a lot of these folks, I like to call them the coalition of the way we've always done things. And sadly for them, it's not really about the students, and they have opposed education freedom from day one, and they're continuing to attack this program because it's more about protecting a system than it is about doing what's best for the students. Because if it's about what's best for the kids, we shouldn't care about where a parent is choosing to get their kid educated, because nobody knows a kid better than their parents. And I think what's implicit in a lot of these attacks that we hear is that the left just really doesn't trust parents to make the best decision. They want the decisions being made by bureaucrats about what's taught to kids, but ultimately parents are the ones that should have that decision, and education freedom is how we put parents back in charge.
Yes, and that's exactly it. And I'll throw this one out there. I'm old enough. I was actually in junior high, I think, when Jimmy Carter proposed creating the departments of education and energy. And ever since the education department was created at the federal level, we've seen nothing but test scores and overall education in the United States decline, unfortunately. And the numbers back up what I just said.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's at the heart of what we talk about when the reason as conservatives we talk about limited government and the role for limited government. We know that central planning doesn't work. You know, the reason communism failed is that there's no way a bureaucrat can do a better job of planning the economy than we can as free private individuals. And that same logic applies to a lot of what happens across government still today, and even in education. You know, to your point, the idea that somebody in Washington knows better about what my kids should be learning here in Arkansas is preposterous. And, the ultimate role and the ultimate responsibility for educating kids has always been with the parents. And the reason a lot of people are using this program, I mentioned because kids are different. Some have special needs. Some it's just not a good fit. There's a lot of public schools that have issues with bullying, and parents just need to find a different environment for their kids. They want an environment where their kids are going to get taught with values that they align with. And I think it's just really exciting to see that this program is working. Demand for it has been incredible. We've got almost 50,000 kids using it across the state. And Arkansas should be really proud of this program, and we should defend it because the attacks are not going to stop anytime soon.
And
the other side never stops.
That's exactly where I want to pick this up when we come back from traffic. Okay, folks, I'll be back with Jay after we check in on the traffic as we get you home safely from work. Northwest Arkansas. So I have Jay on with me here from Opportunity Arkansas. And Jay, we were leaving off that Arkansas is now ranked third in the nation as education is improving so significantly and education freedom. And that allows me to segue. This week we saw on the news, and I mentioned it, that the state government has okayed another $32 million towards the education freedom accounts. Can you get a little bit more into that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was an additional appropriation that was made. And as your listeners may know, every year the legislature approves a budget. And so when we were in session last year, they approved the budget for this program and anticipated that it would have a lot of demand. What we found out was demand actually exceeded even those expectations. We had almost 50,000 kids that applied to use this program. And so that required us to go back and fully fund it to ensure that every kid in Arkansas that wanted to use education freedom has the opportunity to do so. This was something that really should be celebrated. As I mentioned, we are leading the country in education freedom. The reason it's requiring more money to fund is because there are more kids that are using it. The thing that surprised me when watching the discussion around this is we had some folks who were questioning the amount of money that we were spending and how in the world are we going to be able to fund this program. All of a sudden, we had a lot of concern about the amount of money that taxpayers were spending on education. Now, keep in mind, even with this additional appropriation, the total amount of money spent on education freedom is about $300 million in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. Now, that's $300 million out of a total education budget over $6 billion. So we're talking about a drop in the bucket here. And it's also curious because usually when you hear, folks at the legislature talk about funding education, it's celebrated as an investment in the kids and our future. But all of a sudden, there was some concern about education freedom. Now, thankfully, the legislature passed this appropriation and it was the right thing to do. But I think it's time for us to pause and just acknowledge that this program is a value for taxpayers. Kids who choose to use an EFA, if a parent chooses for their kid to participate in this program, they get about half the amount of funding as a student does if they stay in a traditional public school. Okay. I'll say that again, half the amount of money. So this program is actually a saving for taxpayers. And I just think it's something that we need to celebrate because, once again, we have incredible demand for this program. It's a value for taxpayers. It's delivering results for parents who felt stuck and did not have another option. And so we're glad that this appropriation was passed because it's a wise use of resources for the state of Arkansas, and it's doing the right thing for parents to ensure that they can provide an education that works for their kids. It's been a long road to get here. Conservatives have fought for years for parents to have these options, and now's the time to defend this program. One of my favorite quotes from Ronald Reagan is that freedom is never more than a generation away from extinction. We have to defend it constantly. And that is the case here because we hear from parents every day who are just so thankful for these opportunities. And we're going to hear more and more of those stories as this program continues to grow.
Absolutely. And I agree wholeheartedly with that assessment. And, I was on the side of that too. I believe firmly in parents have the right to decide what is best for their children, not some bureaucrat in Washington or Little Rock.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned Little Rock. I have another number that I'd love to share with your listeners. And it's a little shocking. So bear with me. There's a few numbers here, but I mentioned the total funding for education freedom. So for the entire state, we have around 50,000 kids participating, about $300 million. Compare that to the Little Rock School District, which spends just this last year $370 million, so substantially more, to educate around 19,000 students. So Little Rock School District is spending substantially more to educate about half as many kids that are getting educated through the EFA program for the entire state. That's just one district. So people should keep this in mind when you hear people complain about the cost of the Education Freedom Program. This is a savings for taxpayers, and it's giving parents the option. It's just the right thing to do.
And something and I know there are a lot of good people in government that are just as concerned because they're taxpayers too. But we're seeing all this fraud in Minneapolis, and the Somalis and the daycares are just the tip of the iceberg. There's more stuff being exposed, and I would hate to say it, but it's probably exists in all 50 states as well as the U.S. territories that are taking taxpayer money, that they're going to find this and just, it's only government money. Well, no, it's our money. And that's huge. How much was this Little Rock School District's budget again?
Yeah, $374 million.
Wow.
And I'm glad you brought up fraud because, people try to level that accusation against this Education Freedom Account program. It's just not true. I mean, every one of these expenses has to be pre-approved by the department and has to meet an educational expense. There was a full audit done on this program in conjunction with the University of Arkansas, found virtually zero fraud or misspending. Every transaction that could have been fraudulent was rejected. So that money was not spent. And you compare that to what you mentioned we see in Minnesota. In Arkansas alone, we've seen over $1 billion in Medicaid fraud identified. And so this program, the Education Freedom Program, has a track record that almost any other government program would be envious of. And to your point, there's a lot of work to be done across government, but this is a program that has accountability built in to ensure that these funds are being spent where they're supposed to, and that's to educate the kids of Arkansas.
Absolutely. That's what we want to see. We want, education is so key to being able to succeed in life, and just seeing like, I make a joke about it, but it's not really funny that the whole Baltimore public schools graduating class has been averaging a D average for the last several years. And the Democrats up there are never going to do something. Well, Jay, I appreciate you being on Thursday. You'll be back next Thursday, and we'll have some more to talk about.